On this edition of The Best Times, we explore the post-work world in surviving retirement. We'll take you on a tour of a Victorian-era house, and you'll find out the ways people are living with arthritis. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you. Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. The humorist Will Rogers said, "Half our life is spent trying to find something to do with the time we have rushed through life trying to save." His take on retirement sums up the puzzle that we all feel about the post-work portion of our lives. Will we be able to retire? Will we outlive our money? And what in the world will we do with all that extra time? Tonight we explore the financial and emotional hurdles of surviving retirement.
I think people should try retirement. I think those who say that I'm going to work until the last day because that's who I am and what I am, and when I'm done with the job, then I'm done, that's silly.
I interviewed Mike and Nancy Alley about 5 years ago when they were making their retirement decisions. The economic recession had forced Mike's company to offer him an early retirement package. Mike was 60 years old, and he never envisioned that retirement was just around the corner.
I've been thinking about retirement, but it was in that future. It was around that age, and my vision was at that age I will be retired. And a lot of the emotional planning had not been done. And I'm still not sure that it has been done now, even though I've been retired for 7 months now. Many of us, most of us, have worked very, very hard to get to this stage of life. I am fortunate to be out in that retirement world 6 years before I had planned to be. So this is going to be 6 years of life, really of our own making, that is less dictated by others. So in a way, it's like a gift that's been given to me.
I have titled this segment Surviving Retirement, which is, I admit, a bit tongue-in-cheek. However, I read this article that was out of the Washington Post, which says, Boomers' worst fear, outliving their savings. Now, I'm curious, have each of you seen that in your experience, with your clients?
That's precisely the question that they usually walk into the office to ask. And most people have that anxiety either in the back of their minds or in the front of their minds, but it's out there at some point. And what I encourage, what we try and do is help them go through the exercise to find out. And most people have never done the math, and it's just math.
Are you seeing people come in your door, employees?
Yes, and when they start talking about contemplating retirement, their first worry is, will they have enough money and will they have good health insurance?
Two big worries. Let me switch over to finances. Now, I guess there are three elements that go into retirement: our health, our finances, and the emotional side of things. So let's talk about finances, because that's probably the first thing that people think of when they think of retirement is, do I have enough money, as you said? Well, how do you know you have enough money? Is there a formula that one can apply?
There's an exercise you can go through, and the variables are what you want to live on, and that standard of living that you want to maintain, and you have to adjust that over decades with cost of living adjustments to compensate for inflation. Then there's the capital base you have and the amount you're willing to save. There's the age at which you want to be independent, and there's the risk you take. Those are really the only variables. And if you're willing to give on one, you might have to, and hardwire some of the others. That's fine, but you've got to decide which is the most important.
Well, so you have a nest egg. Is there a formula for the amount you should withdraw from that nest egg on a yearly basis and maintain it throughout your life?
An interesting question. There have been a lot of rules of thumb that have been used over the years, and that some people have used a 4.5% distribution rate. Yeah. The problem with that is that rate was determined when most people had a 60-40 split, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, and that 40% in bonds was yielding 5 or 6%. Well, right now it's not. So you've really got to be careful about those very quick and dirty calculations. But after that, you have also got to be willing to adjust. For clients that went through the 07, 08, 09 financial meltdown, people felt somehow victims, like, oh, this is terrible, why is this happening right when I retire? And I have to say again, the capital markets really didn't care when you retired, but you do have some choice. You have the choice to say, this year I may not take a vacation, so I don't have to draw down as much from that portfolio. It can make a huge difference if you're not so fixated on a percentage or a formula, because you really do have to roll with the punches in retirement. And since retirements can last 30 to 35 years, that's a lot of open field running.
Let's talk about that length of retirement. But I'd like to hear both of you talk about that, because what role is the longevity revolution having in this retirement picture? How is it complicating this picture?
I think that most people used to think that their retirement was a time to spend with their extended family and to travel. But if your retirement ends up being a 30-year retirement, you really have to figure out what's going to be meaningful for you for a 30-year period, which is a long period of time.
It's a long time. That's almost as much as one's work life.
Right.
Which is a tremendously, and that gets me into the identity crisis, I'll call it for lack of a better term, because one day we're so-and-so at such and such job, and the next day, well, we've got all this time on our hands. How do you deal with the identity crisis?
Well, I think that people, whether they know it or not, look at three things to define success, and one is meaningful work, one is significant relationships, and the third is making a positive difference. So for people who all three of those things fall into meaningful work, so if they're successful and they have good relationships, good work, and they have positive impact in their work, and their work ends, they're lost, because that was their identity. So people really needs to start to define success in all three of those areas, because once work ends, they'll still have significant relationships. They'll still be able to make a positive difference in people's lives outside of their work life. So people have to kind of diversify their portfolio in life in addition to their finances.
Yeah. Do both of you see a difference between men and women in retirement? And what is it? On the financial side of things, do you see a difference?
I think in the traditional, where the man goes out in the world and earns a living and the woman takes care of the home and rears the children and all of that, there's a huge difference, because when that breadwinner is not earning that paycheck every day, there's a real psychological crisis that can go on there.
Do you see a difference on the emotional side between men and women?
Absolutely. I think that women are more used to diversifying their career, and maybe not working as much to accommodate family needs or to problem solve around family needs. So they do other things to compensate. And so when it's time for retirement, they may have more relationships, they may have more networking opportunities, they may have developed other hobbies, and they can continue on with those in retirement. So sometimes men end work and they're not quite sure what to do with themselves unless they've had those relationships or those hobbies prior to retirement. So there definitely is a difference with how women and men may use their time after retirement and be prepared for that.
Well, how should one use that time? Because we're going to have a lot of time on our hands in retirement. What should we fill it with?
I think at this point, you're allowed to fill it with what you enjoy, right? And so if you enjoy church work, If you enjoy volunteering at your local hospital or animal shelter, I think you need to start preparing ahead of time. What is it that I enjoy, and how can I do that in my retirement? Do I want to travel? Have some of these exciting conversations. So kind of make that spin with, oh my goodness, am I prepared for retirement? But spin that and say, wow, here comes retirement, you know, and make it exciting rather than this next ugly phase of my life, you know?
I read an interesting phrase in that regard. It said, don't think about retiring from something, think about retiring to something.
That's perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And I love how, you know, the phrase that you don't use retirement anymore. You use it as a financial independence.
It's choices.
Choices, right. It's another great choice to make.
The other thing to remember, though, is that when you're working, what are you not doing? Well, you're not spending as much money. So when you're doing the mathematics, what we find is a lot of people think, oh, I'll be spending less money once I'm retired. We find just the opposite, at least for, you know, potentially up to a decade or longer. People are spending a good bit more money than they were spending when they were working. And you need to factor that in on the front end, because most people don't want to have to go back to work at some point during that time.
I want to touch on Social Security quickly, because that is the only benefit you can outlive.
Right.
What role should Social Security play in your nest egg?
Well, it's a good core holding. You can't outlive it. It will adjust for inflation. There are concerns going forward that it might be needs tested at some point. It will be there. It will be there for everyone. It may be reduced for those who have saved more and invested more over the years, but it's a significant core holding, and one that, you know, most people really have to have.
What percentage of one's retirement nest egg should it represent? Is there a number you can put on?
There isn't a number, because once again, you've got to calculate that. How much money do I want to spend during these years? And if Social Security covers that number, then you're golden.
Let's close out with what factors go together to make a successful retirement?
I think in addition to financial planning, it's emotional planning. And to really start having those conversations with your significant relationships and, you know, with yourself about what is it that I want to see myself doing in retirement. You know, as kids grow, they think about, what do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to major in college? And I think that that question never ends, you know, and so it's, what do I want to be in my retirement? And I think have fun with that.
Right.
Well, we always say there are three things. The first is health, and that trumps the other two. The second is enough money, and enough is the operative word, and you've got to decide what is enough. And the third thing is you've got to have something to get up for every day. If you lose that, it becomes a very lonely time in many ways.
Well, thanks to both of you for being on Best Times discussing retirement.
Thanks.
We both started working when we were 16.
Well, actually 14. But we're not.
Now, you know, I think at one time we talked about what we would do when we retired, and his dream was to do exactly the same thing he started doing when he was 14.
Yep. I may yet own a soda fountain.
Mike and Nancy Ali were just beginning their retirement journey when I spoke with them 5 years ago. Today, they live in East Tennessee in the shadow of the Smoky Mountains. They've driven across Canada and the States a number of times. This picture is from British Columbia. Mike spends his time coaching soccer teams. Nancy volunteers at the local library, and they both are deeply involved with their church. They have two pieces of retirement advice. Don't sit back, get involved, and continue to challenge yourself. And in case you're wondering, Mike hasn't opened a soda fountain yet. One of the most popular shows on PBS is Downton Abbey, the chronicle of an aristocratic British family transitioning from the Victorian era into the modern world. Memphis has its own Downton Abbey, albeit a smaller version, in the Mallory Neely House, a perfectly preserved museum that offers visitors a window into the world of Victorian-era Memphis. In 1852, wealthy banker Isaac Kirtland bought 3 acres of land on what was then the outskirts of Memphis and built a 2-story home for his family. In 1883, a cotton merchant named James Columbus Neely bought the house and began the ornate renovations that have created the Mallory Neely house that we see today.
The collections, the furnishings, the interiors are all original to the house and the family. And so what we see in the house is as the Neelys had decorated it at the turn of the century. And it's one intact, authentic piece. It's not a conglomeration of sort of period or of the style of kind of era. They're the actual pieces, they're the actual, collections that the family had. So it's like they walked out down the street to go to church or something, and we get to step into their house and see how they lived.
It's remarkable to find any Victorian-era home with so many of its original fixtures intact.
I guess one of the most striking things is when you first come into the house, the entry doors themselves, the stained glass windows are from the World's Fair, from Chicago. And also when you walk into the entry room, the entry hall, which is the grand hall, this is where you in Victorian times, you show your prominence, and it sets the tone for the house. It's a very public space, very elegant and opulent. You see up the grand staircase, the stained glass window on the landing. That also was purchased by the Neelys after the Chicago World's Fair.
The house has 25 rooms and approximately 16,000 square feet. The Italianate architecture and high Victorian style are evident everywhere. Look up and you'll see frescoes on the ceiling and elaborate plasterwork. That's not burl wood inlay on the doors. It's faux wood grain painting, which was very popular with the Victorians. The double parlor is filled with imported furniture and expensive carpets, all designed to impress visitors. 2 massive gaslight chandeliers hang from the ceiling, a remnant of the days before Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. And in one corner is an embroidered silk screen from China that the Neelys purchased at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904.
Each of the 4 panels represents one of the seasons of the year. And it's a teak wood frame, and that piece was actually chosen to be sent to the St. Louis World's Fair by the last Empress Dowager of China.
Portraits of James Neely and his wife overlook the dining room table with seating for up to 24 people. The family would dress for dinner and be served by a staff of 7. And the servants made sure the business of the house ran smoothly.
The house was heated by coal fireplaces, 20 coal fireplaces throughout the house, and that took a lot of work to keep all that going. And the rooms had servants' call buttons, bells, to push to have someone come and see what your need was. There's actually, there was a mechanism under the floor in the dining room where the master of the house could press it down with his foot to call someone to come to attend to the table.
Behind the main house is the servants' quarters. Prior to emancipation, this was the home to the house's slaves. Little is known about their names or their lives. The rooms upstairs are not as elegant as their downstairs counterparts. After the turn of the century, the Neelys' youngest daughter, Daisy, married cotton merchant Barton Mallory, and their family lived on the 2nd floor. Daisy's sister Pearl and her family occupied the 3rd floor. The last resident of the house was Daisy's daughter, Frances. Affectionately known as Miss Daisy, she lived in the house with her female companion, an African-American woman named Annie Bess, who had been a chambermaid for Daisy's parents.
After her husband passed away and Miss Daisy's husband passed away, because their age was only 10 years separate, and they'd known each other for decades, and Annie Bess moved into the house. It was just so sort of interesting and very, 1940s, 50s Memphis, very unusual to have an elderly, white lady and elderly black lady both living side by side in the bedrooms upstairs in the mansion.
Daisy Neely Mallory died in 1969 at the age of 98. having witnessed nearly a century of changes to the world surrounding her home. She wanted the house preserved as a museum, and today it stands as one of the finest examples of Victorian-era residences in the country.
This is one place that's been here unchanged for 160 years. It is a moment captured in time.
One out of every 5 adults in America has some form of arthritis. It's a disease that is second only to heart disease as the cause of work disability, and costs this country over $128 billion a year. Age is one of the risk factors, which means many of us will be living with arthritis. How common is arthritis?
Once you hit 55, sort of a rule of thumb you can do from 55 to 80 is take the age, your age, and divide it by 2, and that will give you roughly the percentage of people in the population at your age that have radiographic osteoarthritis. Now, radiographic means when you look at an X-ray you can see the changes of osteoarthritis, and they are very specific. However, symptomatic osteoarthritis, fortunately, is less than that, usually around half the amount of incidence that we see on the radiograph. So if you have 40% incidence in a population radiographic, around 20% would have symptomatic osteoarthritis. So it can be there and you really don't know it.
What causes osteoarthritis?
The generic version of osteoarthritis, so we don't know what causes it. There are some what we call genetic mutations in the collagen that makes up the cartilage of the joint and some of the other connective tissue proteins that make up the joint that will predispose those individuals to get osteoarthritis at an early age. Those are specific genetic defects that are inherited or spontaneous mutations occur, but they are very, very rare. The more common varieties, we really don't know what the cause is, and it's been a real impediment to really develop effective treatments to really understand what the cause of it is.
What are the risk factors?
Being overweight is one of the most common associations, particularly of the weight-bearing joints, the knees and the hips particularly. So the heavier you are, the more chance you have of getting osteoarthritis in the knees and the hips, even at a young age. You fall down and dislocate your shoulder or something, or in an automobile accident and fracture your hip or something, that is probably going to set you up to get osteoarthritis in that joint at an earlier age.
Can osteoarthritis be prevented?
You really can't prevent it, no. not as to our state of knowledge right now, in terms of diet or whatever. So we mentioned things like healthy diet. Vitamin D is very important to help to decrease the severity of some of the arthritides, but there's really no way to really prevent it.
How can you manage arthritis pain?
Well, we like to try to get the patients to accept high-dose acetaminophen or Tylenol, the generic form of Tylenol. 500 milligram tablet, 2 of those 2 or 3 times a day, if you don't have liver disease, can be taken quite safely.
Is arthritis inherited?
Your chances are increased. My mother had tremendous osteoarthritis in her hands, and I've got early signs of it in my hands. So yes, there is a type that's highly associated with family members.
What does the future hold?
The future holds, I think, a lot of promise. We've come a long ways with rheumatoid arthritis when I was a fella, but now we have with the so-called biologics, the Enbrel, Humira type medications that are designed to knock out a specific cytokine or a cell receptor have been very effective in controlling rheumatoid arthritis. Stem cells that could be taken from your fat tissue, but there is quite impressive reports of small studies showing tremendous reversal of a variety of arthritides with stem cells.
For more information about arthritis, go to the website of the Arthritis Foundation. Want more information about life after 50? Go to our website, wkno.org/besttimes, and send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Chris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plough Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you.